Alrighty, today's second review is going to be The Beatles Get Back, which was a mini, like a docu-series, obviously starring the Beatles, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. So, uh, now, they did go over a lot of, like, history stuff in the very first episode. I wrote down as much as I could because it was, like, there's so much to, go over. So this was all about the Get Back project, which is what was being documented in this movie. So the Get Back project, which was in January of 1969, uh, had over 60 hours of film footage and over 100 hours of audio recordings. So that was kind of cool. Just to know that there was so much, uh, so much that they probably still could show. But obviously, I think the series was probably close to like 8 hours between like the three episodes because they were all. Oh no, it might have even been closer to 9 hours really because I think all the episodes were close to 3 hours in length. At least one of them was because I believe the first one was like 2.5 hours, the second one was like 2 hours and 50 minutes, and then the last one was like 2 hours and 14 minutes. So yeah, pretty close to 9 hours of footage that they showed, and kind of like compiled. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to show all of it, at least not in one docu-series. They could do like maybe a part two showing more, but it was just kind of cool to like see their like creative process over time and like how the band kind of had like their ups and downs. Obviously, you don't really get to see a lot of behind the scenes with bands these days. So yeah, it was definitely cool to see like the behind the scenes stuff and them like working out their songs. And I feel like a lot of bands have probably like taken a lot of what the Beatles did and used it. Like I see Metallica a lot of the times, like when they're running through their songs the first time, it's all just like they're doing like the guitars and the drums, but there really is no lyrics to the song. And I noticed McCartney doing that an awful lot. Like he'd have the melody out, so he'd just kind of like make the sounds along with the music. And yeah, that was just kind of cool to see. Like James Hetfield does the same thing. So I can imagine he probably picked that up, maybe listening to some Beatles music, or yeah, along the way, probably knowing that they were doing that kind of thing. So it's just a very weird thing that you pick up the creative processes of the bands that you used to listen to. So I feel like maybe James Hetfield is a little bit of a Beatles fan, possibly. And I mean, who isn't? There's got to be. I think everybody probably has at least one or two Beatles songs that they enjoy, if not several. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like when I was younger, I was never really a fan of their music. Like in my teenage years, but I mean, in like public school, I was listening to a lot of like super. Like I was listening to bands like Cannibal Corpse and Do Scented and Nile, and like I was just really into like the heavy metal from like a younger kid. So even when I was like a little, like really little, like probably like 3 or 4, maybe even younger than that. Like I had to listen to Thunderstruck by AC/DC twice before I would even get in bed. So yeah, you could always tell that I was going to be like a kind of like heavy rock metal guy, and I've just gotten heavier over the years. Like now I listen to like deathcore and stuff. So, but I mean, the Beatles are a rock band, and I've learned to appreciate them definitely more through my 20s and early 30s compared to like my teenage years. I think it was just the people I was around. Like it was just kind of like the cool thing to do was hate on a lot of the older bands. But I mean, yeah, now that I'm a little older and I sit back and really like enjoy their music, yeah, because they have so much, and I'm sure there's still plenty of Beatles music that has never been released, unfortunately, that we'll never get to listen to. But yeah, it's just kind of cool to see all of the people behind the scenes and like all of the songs that they worked on for this project, that some of them were like so old that they had to go back in and like retouch them when they were working on them, sort of thing. So yeah, it was just cool to see. So in Liverpool in 1956, John Lennon had a band called the Quarrymen. So that was the original name of the band, or at least his band. He invited Paul and George to join the band a couple of years later. So I suppose they must have been friends, because otherwise, yeah, or they got to know each other over those couple of years, and then eventually he was like, these guys are the right fit. And then they changed their name to the Beatles. And then in 1962, Ringo joined the band. And then in 1963, Beatlemania had swept through all of Britain. So they had just become popular real quick. And yeah, I don't really know how many albums they actually had by that point, but they had certainly, kind of done their whole rise to fame pretty quickly. In 1966, the Beatles decide on no more touring or live performances. And I think that was basically because they were getting to the point where people were comparing them to like God and stuff, and that's not really what they wanted their image to be, obviously. Um, they didn't really want to be like a messiah to people, right? They just wanted to play their music and be a band. So it was kind of crazy that, people considered them like that. So I did give this movie a 9 out of 10, or this docu series, I guess, a 9 out of 10. I thought it was very deserving of that, just learning a lot more about the Beatles' history, and just seeing, like, again, their creative process. So yeah, but again, it was kind of strange that a lot of people like thought they were like gods. Um, Again, they're just people making music. Like, I think we have to kind of sit back a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with having like a favorite band or a favorite actor, but you know, idolizing them to a point where you think they're like a all powerful being. You got to remember they're human too, you know. And I hate when people post like stuff like, oh, this actor is getting like out of hand with people, and I'm like, no, you got to remember they're people. They also need their own personal space. So when they're saying, stay back, don't be like coming up to me, sort of thing, and like crowding me, like, be respectful. It's not that hard. It shouldn't be that hard of a thing to understand. And yeah, if you're going to make somebody out to be like more than what they are, and they were probably getting threats, from the looks of it, they were getting quite a few threats. So yeah, I think they just kind of shut everything down because they didn't really want to put their lives at risk, right? So the Beatles start Apple Corps, uh, which was to look after like all of their business affairs. I'm not exactly sure like all of what it entailed, but yeah, it covered quite a bit of like their business. Um, so in 1969, the Beatles perform in front of a live audience again, and I think they performed like their one album in front of a live audience, and then they stopped performing for so many years, right? The Get Back sessions began, and they had 14 new songs that must be written in 2 weeks, which is a crazy crunch time because then you have to. So a lot of them were new songs, right? Some of them were old stuff that McCartney and Lennon had worked on, like when they were much younger. So I mean, they had enough material, right, to work with. But um, even George left the band at one point, and then they had to, kind of talk to him about it. And it seemed that John and Yoko's relationship was causing like another rift between the band, and then it seemed like it was going to be down to just Paul and Ringo by the end of it, and they were going to have to end up finding some like new members, which is absolutely crazy. That late in the game to try to find new members for a band, right? Eventually, they worked everything out. They stopped filming. Uh, they stopped filming originally where they were because I think it was just too much for them, right? So they moved. They eventually moved to like Apple, like their own Apple Core Studios. This, so yeah, they moved there shortly after George had left the group. But before that, Paul again had suggested using songs from the early days that were never completed. So that was kind of cool. And it was just sort of like, that was like, Paul seemed to kind of be like the leader of the band in a sense, I guess. And John would kind of try to take control. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see like they were basically kind of like the two leaders, and then George and Ringo just kind of like followed whatever Paul and John were saying because they worked on a lot more songs than anybody else did. Not to say that George didn't have his hand in some of the songs too, because he did, and I think even Ringo wrote like a couple. But yeah, it was definitely more. It was definitely more Paul and Oh my God, Paul and John. Right. I don't know why that name slipped my head randomly, but anyway. Uh, so yeah. Um, the first meeting, I guess, with George didn't resolve any of the issues, but then they went to meet with him again, and they ended up deciding to push the show back 1 week, which was probably for the best, right? Because they were working out like the last few tweaks in the studio with all of their songs and learning them, sort of thing. So it was kind of crazy to see all that. Like 3 weeks isn't a lot of time to learn 14 new songs, or 14 songs for that matter, even if you kind of knew them, to like polish them out completely. Like it's a crazy, crazy crunch time, right? So yeah, they decide to shut down the uh, docu recordings, I believe, is what I wrote there. Yeah, and obviously move to their new Apple Studios. So 16 days of practice with the plan now to play on the roof of their own building. Now, they had come up with a whole bunch of different crazy ideas, like going overseas, I think, at one point, even being on like a cruise ship to play, but none of those came to fruition, unfortunately. I just don't think they ended up having the budget for it, probably, and I think they wanted to kind of eventually. It got to the point where they just wanted to stay in their hometown and play for like their own people, sort of thing. So they decided to set up like this rooftop concert, which was cool and probably far more iconic now than they thought it was going to be when they did it originally, right? So it got like so much attention that there were people on other roofs watching the concert and people on the street. The police ended up showing up and asking them to turn off the PA because it was so loud. Um, they continued the concert, and they were asking people, not continue to go up on the roof because it was at like weight capacity. So they didn't want the band going through the roof, right? That would have been absolutely crazy. Now, the thing that I thought was interesting about this, and I don't think I ever knew, was that the rooftop concert was the Beatles' last live public performance. So they never performed live again after that, which is kind of crazy because that was 1969, and I'm pretty sure they stayed together through most of the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I don't really know like when exactly they decided that they were going to kind of go their own ways. Now, obviously, I know that John and Paul had like their own solo careers, and Yoko Ono has like her own solo career. Not really a fan of Yoko Ono's music. Like it just, and that's coming from somebody who listens to like heavy metal and like a lot of like brutal vocals. It just, there's no real like words to any of Yoko Ono's music. It's just kind of like screaming into a microphone. Now it did work for some of these songs that they were doing in the studio. Like her vocals kind of like backed the song. So I'm not saying necessarily that it wasn't that she didn't have some input into this music, but yeah, it was just kind of like I couldn't believe that she seemed to be fine, like fine as a person. Like yeah, she seemed like a nice, like normal, humble kind of person, and very soft spoken. And then when she was doing her music, it was just like, what exactly, what exactly is this? I don't know. I will never really understand her take on music exactly, but I know some people that love it, like completely love Yoko Ono. So, I mean, all the more power to you if you do like her music. But I've never been a fan. I've tried to listen. I've even like watched her do covers of other people's songs, like her own kind of take. But yeah, it just never really interested me anyway. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can cover for this. It was just kind of funny to see like them joking as a band together, and like yeah, just all the behind the scenes stuff that you don't really get to see, like them shooting like a movie too, like whoever was like some of the people that were working with them shooting a movie with one of them as well. It was just like there was so much going on that yeah, I think they were kind of having a hard time focusing on just the music side of things, so they decided to move it out of the big huge like studio that they were in and have like a more quiet, intimate space where they could just kind of work together, right? And they definitely goofed around a lot during like those 3 weeks, but when they were when they were really getting down to like crunch time, they definitely focused up and performed like a amazing concert on this rooftop at the end of the docu series. So yeah, I will say it was worth the watch if you never like watched anything about the Beatles. I would say this would be a good place to start. Now it is one of those ones that you're probably going to want to watch over a few days because the episodes are long and some of it is a bit dry, but I mean you're learning a lot about the band as it goes on. So yeah, it's interesting if you didn't know a lot about the Beatles history. I think this could teach you a lot and maybe even, you know, give you some newfound respect for the band. So yeah. Other than that, 9 out of 10 if I didn't already say that, I believe I did. And I will see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.